This morning we're in an early model JK with an L83 5.3 10-speed. This is quickly becoming, I want to say my favorite, but I always say that, so I'm just going to say this is going to become one of the best, most value combinations in the JK. And the reason is, it's a lower cost engine, it has excellent performance. The 5.3 impresses me every time I get into it. You think it's a bigger engine than it is, especially when combined with a 10-speed. It can run on regular gas. It's just perfect for the JK. It's not underpowered at all. In fact, I think even guys with 40s would say that the 5.3 pulls their JKs just fine. We've been buying a lot of these 5.3s new from GM, and one of the biggest benefits of this engine right now is availability. Because these engines are relatively new production, it means they're available, and they're available at a good cost. We really like the LS engines, but you got to remember, most of those engines went obsolete over 5 years ago, so they're getting long in the tooth, harder to find, more expensive, and when you find used ones, they get higher miles. The LTs that we're purchasing today are brand new engines right from GM, and we're also buying new transmission. And of course, because the transmissions are new production, it means they're also available. The 6L80s again are going up in price and getting more difficult to find, so we just have to evolve to this new generation of engine, and I'm all for it. These engines are awesome. Guys, you can see how easy it is getting on the freeway with an L83. It's just completely effortless. You see those RPMs just kind of stay right in one spot because the high gear transmission. And then cruising up this parkway is going to be a breeze. No struggling like you would with a V6 3.8 4-speed. The market's been kind of moving around lately. What I've been noticing, and I've been doing this for over 10 years in the JK. I've been doing engine conversions over 30 years, actually closer to 40 years. But in the JK, what I'm seeing in the market is guys are starting to migrate towards engine combinations that, one, are legal, because a lot of states now are starting to crack down on emissions, especially states like California, Colorado, Oregon. I talked to Oregon and Wisconsin recently, and they're talking about going to CVN testing. So it's becoming more and more critical that your engine remain compliant. So that means in the newer JKs and the JLs, you need to have an engine that is the same year or newer than a chassis. And that's one of the reasons we're now into the L87. And we have our L87 10-speed on the road. I think it's a 2020, might be a 2021, but it runs awesome. I've actually got a video on it that I'll hopefully be posting soon. It is an L86 with dynamic fuel management, and I'll just say that the DFM, while I didn't think I would like it, actually makes active fuel management more tolerable. Instead of 8-cylinder and 4-cylinder mode like a switch, it stages the cylinders in and out, so you could be running down the road as a 2-cylinder, a 3-cylinder. It's kind of a weird sensation, but I actually like it, and we're going to leave the DFM active in the L87, and we'll have a video on that soon. So one, we have guys being concerned about emissions. Two, we have guys wanting to get out of the old 4 and 5-speed transmissions and get into the 8 and the 10 speeds, because they drive their 5-speed Hemi around for a while, then they get into a 6-speed LS or a 10-speed LT, and immediately they see the advantages. So in the shop, we've actually done several 5-speed to 10-speed conversions recently. Another factor is cost. The current economic situation with parts and labor supply is just driving the cost of everything up. There are rumors about Chrysler and the Hemi, maybe dropping the Hemi, going for a high-tech V6, whatever. But what we're seeing with GM is they're jumping into performance with both feet. You look at that new 1,000-plus horsepower big block Chevy-based engine. That's awesome, but that's not going to be a compliant engine in your JK. But let's take a look at the LT2. Let's take a look at the LT6. The LT6 is an amazing engine. It is a 5-point-something liter engine putting out over 600 horsepower, dual overhead cam. I mean, it's got all the technology. I'm not sure how well that would perform in a JK. I personally think there's no replacement for displacement, which means the larger cubic inch engines usually perform better in the heavier vehicles. And with DFM now, it's multiple displacement, because when you start shutting them cylinders off, you're basically mimicking a smaller engine, and you say, why do you want to do that? And there's something called pumping losses, and pumping losses are the vacuum that's created when a cylinder isn't needed, or it's not a wide open throttle. A wide open throttle, that's where the engine is most efficient. When you start throttling it down, you have to fight those pumping losses, which is the cylinder. With DFM, you can pretty much select any displacement you want. What that means is we can take a 6.2 liter engine and make it act like a 3 liter engine or a 2.5 liter engine. And driving the L87 became more apparent the advantages of cylinder deactivation. Now, of course, I've been working with cylinder deactivation since the early LSs, and we've been using it, but the gains really aren't that dramatic. I mean, we're not seeing 20-30% better mileage. You might see 5%, maybe 10% on the outside if you drive in a specific way in a lighter vehicle where you're in the 4-cylinder mode a lot. But with DFM, what I'm finding is it's pretty much staying in some form of cylinder deactivation most of the time when you're at a light cruise, and it's not that annoying. So we're going to go further with that. But getting back to what's going on in our market right now, supply and demand has definitely been a big one. The movement towards technology, guys migrating towards these LTs and these high gear transmissions. You know, we can't do engine swaps like we did 30 years ago. I'd love to be putting small block Chevys in these with 3 speeds, but that's just not the reality anymore. And the reality is the advantages of these later engines just blows away those old engines. I mean, even this little 5.3 here is rated at close to 360 horsepower. I remember when the LT1s, in fact, I have a 1970 Corvette with an LT1, high compression, solid camshaft, 11-to-1 compression ratio, and it was putting out about 360 horsepower. So here we have an engine that'll idle at 500 RPM, put out the same horsepower, and the torque is just tremendous. If you drove this little 5.3, you'd swear it was a larger engine than it is. The constant battle we have at Motec is to keep these swaps affordable and stay at the edge of technology, and I think we're doing that. Being the first LT5, doing the L87, of course we were the first ones to do the integrated LS. We were the first ones to do the integrated LT way back in 2016. And that's going to lead me to my next thing, and that's the module. Essentially, we've got rid of most everything we don't need in our conversions. And when we talk about the interface or the bridge that we use, the CAN bridge, that's a common technology today. They use it in pretty much everything from heavy equipment like tractors to medical equipment. And networking equipment over a CAN is just very common today. And when it comes to automobiles, it's the same thing. They just keep adding modules, a door lock module, a seat heater module, and they're just tapping into the CAN. And it is a very efficient way of transmitting data. So after looking at some of the other swaps that have come through our shop that aren't using our setup, that are hybriding or trying to hack and patch things, it becomes apparent the advantages of running a complete GM powertrain. Like that Corvette in front of me, we could take the engine out, throw it in this Jeep, and make it run exactly the way it runs in that Corvette. We're not changing the camshaft, we're not changing the firing order, we're not hacking the primary operating system or calibration so it thinks it's an engine that it's not. It's exactly the way GM intended it. And one of the big advantages of that method is that pretty much anything GM comes out with, including the new LT6, can be integrated into our swap. So we can install that engine in the vehicle and run a bidirectional bridge or CAN module and allow it to run the way it's supposed to. We're not fighting it, trying to retune it. GM's done all that for us. So my guys wanted me to mention the single module. You guys know the single module came out over a year ago. We've been installing them in vehicles, but they're not 100% in production. And let me tell you where we're at. Most of you know our V3 module, our CAN module, has been out for a long time, many years. I think we've probably made over 1,000 of them at this point, and it's a great module. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to step up and eliminate the Jeep computer. By doing that, we essentially have a stock module count. And it's not just eliminating the Jeep computer, it's eliminating all the wiring that goes to it. So like our RPM signals, starter circuits, tachometer circuits, all that's gone. And it's all now communicated over the CAN bus. So what we did, and this was quite a while back, is we took the V3 module and we refined it. We took the circuits out that we didn't need that can be replaced with CAN. And those are exactly the circuits that it's talked about. We no longer need the GPCM to control the RPM, starting, fuel pump, and all that stuff. That's all done over the CAN network now. So even with the PCM installed, the wiring is a lot simpler with our V4 module. But we went one step further. Essentially, the V4 module is a V3 module, so don't think it's some giant step in technology. It's not. It's a V3 module that just had another CAN circuit added to it. So now we got 2 Chrysler CAN networks online and the GM, which is very similar to some of the other modules in the vehicle. Most of you know that the TIPM or the totally integrated power module, some of you call it the central gateway, has pretty much everything going through it. Pretty much all the CAN circuits meet at the TIPM. And the TIPM has control of a lot of things. The TIPM controls things like your fuel pump, your air conditioning. You'd be surprised how much control the TIPM has outside of the powertrain control module. But that's a benefit for us because we leave that in place and we leave it running exactly the way it's supposed to. We don't modify it. We just send it the signals that it needs. So what this new module comes down to is we can essentially just program our module just like it's a Jeep PCM or ECM and have it do the same duties. Now the PCM is one of the critical modules in the network, and it also controls security. So we have to keep that in mind. So what we did with this V4 module is we basically remade the V3 module and took out everything that didn't need to be there. So the circuits that were controlling the RPM and starting have been removed. The module's been downsized and it's been simplified. We added a third CAN network. Now this module can be run one of two modes, with a Jeep controller or without. So the vehicle I'm in now does not have a Jeep controller. In fact, this Jeep, when it came in, the C100 harness was all hacked up. I think the customer said something about when it was new, it had a problem with the throttle pedal wires, so the dealer had to hack the harness up and fix it, and it was really a mess. So what we decided was, let's not mess with it, let's just throw all that away and put a single module in. And that's what we did, and that's what we're running on right now. I have virtually an identical vehicle at the shop that's running this same module, and it has the PCM and circuit. The single module, as good as it is, we don't put it in every build, especially in kits. And the reason is the programming at this point, because a single module has to now mimic everything that the PCM does. And one of those things, like I said, is security. So we don't disable the SCIM. We need to have all those rolling encryptions, and that needs to be programmed in. Things like the VIN number has to be programmed in so it can transmit the right VIN number. Now we are working on the single module fetching this data from the vehicle and then programming itself, or self-programming, but we're not there yet. So without the proper programming tools, you can't set up a single module. Like if we were to send you a kit and you were in Dubai, you wouldn't be able to program the single module. But the beauty of the V4 is we can flip a switch, and we do have a GUI for it, which means you can plug into this V4 and select your vehicle. What year it is, automatic, manual, LT, LS, 6, 8, 10 speed, etc. You can select tap shift. Do you want it on the steering wheel, or do you want it off-boarded? Do you want it as a bump shifter? So all those options are built in to our new GUI for the V4. And I hope this isn't confusing, but just know that the new V4 module is a V3 module that can be run as a single module system, and it eliminates a lot of the wiring. In fact, I think we're only running one of the 4 connectors in the PCM when we run the V4 with the PCM. So it's greatly simplified. What's happened over the evolution of our electronics over the last 10 years is we've stayed true to our mission goal. And our mission goal all along was to allow these engines to run the way they're supposed to run. We don't want to run a GM engine with a Chrysler transmission. We don't want to run a GM engine inside of a Chrysler operating system, because as GM comes out with new technology like dynamic fuel management or direct injection, you're not going to control those things with a Chrysler computer. The Chrysler computer is only going to run the most primitive of the GM engines, like the LS3, that has very low technology. But at some point, that's going to run out of steam, it's not going to be legal, and there's other issues with that combination, including tuning. How are you going to tune that engine? The beauty of our setup is anything GM comes out with, we can throw into a vehicle and make it work the way they intended, and you can program it, just like you would a Camaro or a Silverado or a Corvette. In addition, it's more emissions friendly, because we're running all factory components with GM operating systems and calibrations, which is not only what California requires, but what the feds require, the US EPA. And these new LTs are really starting to shine. The new LT7, the new LT2, maybe the new LT6 really are showing the path GM's trying to go into. You look at what the government's trying to force us to do and go all electric. Producing electric energy isn't free. I mean, even if you have a windmill or ocean or sun or whatever, it still has to be converted. And from what I understand, natural gas is one of the biggest powers of electric vehicles. So there's a give and take on that. And the reality is modern gas engines are extremely efficient and are going to be difficult to replace with all electric in the time frame they're trying to achieve. So GM is going gung-ho with these engines. We don't know what direction Chrysler's going to go in, or Ford, but all the fingers are pointing towards smaller, more efficient engines or hybrid engines. So take advantage of this while you can. Getting an LT62 or a 5.3 And I just want to say the 5.3 really is a fabulous engine. Don't overlook it and say you got to go right to a 6.2. Drive one of these things. So the future's looking bright for gas motors at GM. We'll see where the others go. When I jump into one of our V8 conversions, even the LS's, it always puts a smile on my face. When I would jump into a V6, it usually put a frown on my face because I knew whatever drive I was going to do, whether I was going to Utah or California, going up the Baker Grade, it was going to be a pain. So we're going to hit the mountain and we'll see you soon.